The Ink and Paint Club podcast is intended for mature audiences. These guys can't go about like 3 seconds without saying a swear, so, listener discretion is advised.
Space Boy, you're Matt?
Yeah, good to meet you.
Yeah, good to meet you. I'm Darren. Just wanted to get that out of the way. Make sure I know
Yeah,
who you are.
I was waiting the whole time for JD to introduce you.
And I'm sorry. Darren, this is Matt. Matt, this is Darren. You're acquainted.
Perfect. Done.
You just flew into a bunch of nerd ass talk, and I was like, okay, that's fine. I'll wait here.
I'm sorry.
You're listening to the Ink and Paint Club podcast, your weekly home for animation reviews and discussions.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Ink and Paint Club podcast. My name is JD, and sadly, Kyle was not able to be with us today. But we have the ever lovely Mr. Matt here with us.
I'm here.
And he's lovely.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And joining us, someone who hasn't been on here for a minute, but it's good to have him back. So, Darren, welcome back to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me back, JD. I appreciate it. And of course, because this is RPG related, I had to budge my way in.
Yeah, so Darren is kind of like our anime RPG go-to man. So when I was like, hey, who knows something about Dragon Quest? Because I sure don't. The first thing is like, Darren might know something about Dragon Quest.
Oh man, this is going to be such an educational episode.
Probably, because so we are going to be talking about Dragon Quest: Your Story, which just came on Netflix over the weekend. And if I understand correctly, is an adaptation of Dragon Quest V. I don't know what Dragon Quest entries are beloved by fans or whatnot. Yeah.
I'll say this because I think it's fair to say that Dragon Quest V is arguably the most beloved. It's within the top 3 in Japan, especially. This is the favorite entry of the series creator, Yuji Horii. He's gone on record many times, kind of like how Nobuo Uematsu cites Final Fantasy IX as his favorite of the series. This is like...
I do like 9.
Yeah, this is the creator's this is the one. And it's gotten 2 different remakes outside of the original Super Famicom release, so this is nothing necessarily new. It has been adapted to a manga as well, but as far as making it into an entire movie or adaptation like this, I think this is the first of its sort.
Okay.
Yeah, because I think every other adaptation of Dragon Quest has just mostly been manga, and then I think like 1 or 2 anime series, if I was reading that right.
Yeah, there's been anime series that are more or less spin-offs. They're not directly related to the games. There's like there's little winks and references, but nothing quite like this, where this is like, all right, this is us trying to retell the story of Dragon Quest V.
Right, and like... Because I know Final Fantasy has like a fair number of films tied to it now too. Like they have the Advent Children. They have, was it Kingsglaive, one of them too?
Yeah, Kingsglaive.
Yeah. or in the case of Kingsglaive, it's crucial to understanding the universe and lore.
Right. Well, I just meant as far as like being an adaptation of like a Square Enix property. This is like the first for Dragon Quest, really.
In terms of like theatrical, at least, yeah.
Yeah. So how have you played? Well, obviously this is not for JD or me because we know basically all I know about Dragon Quest is all the stuff that they were able to fit into Smash Brothers Ultimate for the Fighters Pass DLC. so I did recognize like some bits of music here and there, but other than that, like, for the most part.
I know what a slime is.
Well, I mean, like, yeah, like very, very basic stuff. But so Darren, have you played Dragon Quest V then?
Oh boy, I have played Dragon Quest V.
This is the answer I was hoping for.
3 times.
Jeez.
I've played a bit of the Super Nintendo version, or Super Famicom. It never actually got released in America. I've played the DS remake, which is considered to be the best version. I played that twice, and then more recently I went back to the PlayStation 2 remake. So this is without a doubt my favorite Dragon Quest game. So I personally was really excited to see them adapt it, especially once the initial trailers were revealed and you got to see the beautiful visual style, the attention to detail for a lot of like the character designs and the particular set pieces they were showing off.
Yeah, it's like it was a very visually impressive film, like, and
Definitely.
down to just like because for the most part, I'm only used to seeing like animation from Japan as like traditional or 2D animation.
Mhm.
So to see like the very particular way that they sort of stage stuff over there, like done in CG, was very interesting. Like, because it's very much like watching like an anime film, but like to see it like in in CG, it's very bizarre at first, but then it just becomes very natural.
It's like
Um,
anime if it was Disney quality.
yeah,
Yeah,
kind of.
that's honestly what it felt like.
And so that's good to hear that you're so familiar with Dragon Quest V, because I would love to hear what you. Well, we'll get to it, but
Yeah.
I'm assuming the ending to this movie is not the ending to the game.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, so yeah, guys,
That's not the ending of the game. I'll tell you that right now.
yeah, we
No
are going to be
spoilers.
talking. We are going to
It's
be
not
talking full
the-
spoilers here. So if you haven't watched the end of this, if you haven't seen the movie, I guess that you don't want to be spoiled, then you know what to do. But yeah, I will say we'll get to it in a bit. But yeah, that ending kind of took me for a loop.
Yeah.
But so just to kind of get our initial impressions down, Matt, I'll start with you since you don't know anything about Dragon Quest V. What did you like your initial impressions coming off of this movie?
I liked it a lot. It seemed like pretty much at the beginning it seemed like kind of your standard like fantasy story, like I mean, and that's just the thing, being born being in this day and age now, is that you've seen so many things that have taken like influence from games this old, like Dragon Quest V, and so you're so familiar with like the types of stories that these sort of things start to tell. But it did surprise me in some spots, like I was, because obviously I'm not familiar with the game. I did read sort of like the wiki article on like the plot of the game to see, kind of how closely they followed it. And it seemed like from the scope of the game and what they were able to cram into the movie, because the movie is like an hour 45 minutes.
Yeah.
And I did like one of my only complaints with the movie is the pacing a bit. But honestly, like given that it's adapting like a whole ass RPG game, like it managed to get in all like the important bits. I'm sure that they probably left out like a ton of stuff, and they kind of shrank stuff for time and all that. But and kind of given how the ending of the movie kind of contextualizes the rest of the movie, I was kind of fine with it at the end. But overall, yeah, no, I actually quite liked it a lot. Like even just beyond because I definitely wanted to check it out because of the trailer, just like how it was animated and everything. It looked really nice. But yeah, no, I would definitely say that it's worth a watch.
Yeah. I kind of share your sentiments with the pacing issue. Because when I first started this movie up, like, oh, that's cute. They're showing like the Super Famicom like graphics and like the text box and stuff. I thought that was cute. But the way they just kind of like gloss over like what I assume is like the first half of the game.
I would say that first little bit with all the visuals of showing like, hey, this is the hero and Bianca meeting for the first time. Then they go to this ghost tower and they help the town and they do all this stuff. Like those Super Famicom scenes are probably the first 6-ish hours of the game.
Oh my god.
Yeah.
Which they just power through.
Yeah, I was gonna say, is like there's stuff in this movie they reference back to that time, and it's like, damn, they didn't spend any time on that. They like, here's like,
they get the very
little,
basic amount to
hey, we went to this ghost tower, no context for it. Here's Bianca and like the Nira, I think her name is.
Yeah, or in Japanese, Flora.
Sure. Like, I must have all that information was going by so fast. Like when Luca meets Nira later in the movie and is like, oh my god, it's this person. I'm like, sure.
Yeah.
I don't remember anything. I don't remember her being a character before, but okay, I'll roll with this.
Yeah, so kind of knowing that the game is so beloved over there, it kind of makes sense that they didn't really need to spend that much time on some of that stuff because they kind of just figured,
Yeah.
oh, basically everyone in Japan knows this story.
yeah,
It's kind of like showing the origin story for Spider-Man now. It's like you just do it.
Yes.
Like
right.
I would say that's 100% the attitude I think they
Yeah.
had when making this. It's like everyone knows this is like a beloved classic. Everyone knows the story. I don't need to tell you how like Beauty and the Beast, how Beast became cursed. I can start talking about it and like go, oh, talking tea sets, and you don't need to really think about that. You just know
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
ingrained in the culture.
Yeah, so that's definitely the vibe I got from this. This is a movie made for Dragon Quest fans. I don't as someone who doesn't know a thing about Dragon Quest, I felt very outsiderish watching this movie. Once they got past some of that, once they got into the actual like after Luca and Harry get taken by the evil wizard man and become slaves, that's kind of where the movie starts to even out a bit. But just like that giant info dump and kind of glossing over this part, the beginning part of the game, I'm like, I don't know what's going on. Things are being told to me and shown to me, and I don't know what any of this means. But sure, why not? But overall, I mean, I think, this movie is very, very pretty looking. It's very well animated. It's a little funny trying to watch. I watched this in English. I don't know about you guys.
I watched it in Japanese.
Okay, so I didn't.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Sure. I initially started watching in English, but I kept noticing the slight desync between like the mouth movements and the end of sentences, and it started to really bother me. So I ended up switching.
Well, that's what I was gonna say. Is that I feel like in like 2D anime, you can get away with the English dub, but because this is like CG animated, like
it's all lip synced.
It's lip synced to Japanese. So yeah, I definitely get the like disconnect of like listening to the English and watching the Japanese mouth movements in there. And a lot of the times it doesn't sync up, and it's very jarring to watch.
Yeah, totally. Like, I had that same thought too because I knew I was going to watch in Japanese from the start, but there was a few scenes here and there where I did go back and rewatch it in English just to kind of get context for like how they might have approached it. And yeah, I had the same exact thoughts. It's like it's way easier to get away with that in traditionally animated anime just because they typically don't tend to do like full on lip syncing. So yeah, it was a little bit bizarre. It was funny because I was reading the reception that the Your Story got in Japan, and apparently a lot of the criticism was that apparently all the voice cast for the Japanese audio, they're all like well-known actors, I guess, and so there was a lot of backlash that they didn't get like voice actors. Whereas in the English version, like I didn't check the full list, but I saw like I think Yuri Lowenthal voices Luca, and like Steve Blum is like a couple of characters in there.
I think Carrie Walgren is a character.
Yeah,
so there's like voice actors, but my wife and I were actually kind of having a discussion about this. Weirdly enough, when we went and watched the Sonic movie, she was asking us like, why didn't they just get the guy who normally voices Sonic to voice him in the movie? And like, because they always do that. Whenever you bring in any kind of small screen fictional character to the big screen, you usually get celebrities to do it. I mean, this is kind of common practice.
I doubt they will do that when they eventually do that Mario movie, but God, I hope I'm not proven wrong.
You know what? I'm fully expecting some celebrity to be Mario and Luigi. I'm not expecting Charles Martinet to be called up to do an entire movie.
You make that man mute if you can't get Charles Martinet in there. He doesn't speak a damn line.
Ben Affleck to act as Mario and Luigi in the Super Mario Brothers movie.
No, if it's Ben Affleck as Mario, you need Matt Damon as Luigi. That's how it goes.
You know what? I'm on board with that now.
I'm down. Let's do it.
I want to hear Matt Damon's best Yahoo!
It'd be beautiful. Okay, so Darren, since you are the person that has played Dragon Quest V a number of times, has an affinity for this series, what did you think of this adaptation?
I definitely can say that as someone who knows the story quite well, I felt like it pretty much required me to have played the game to really get everything, especially some of those references that you mentioned in alluding to like the beginning of the game, going like, "Hey, remember that time when we were kids?" Or "Hey, we met on that boat. I remember you from back there." There's definitely a lot of moments like that where I'm like, "Wow, if I had never played the game, I would be like, what are you talking about? I'd be lost." And that definitely happens a number of times. And the game in particular, there's sort of 3 main, like, time skips.
Right.
There's
So
the
I wanted to
child
ask
yeah,
about that. So, like, the actual time skips that happen, are they time skips in the game, or do they actually kinda show what happens, like, during those little bits of time that
they're
tran
pretty closely related to how it's pretty one-to-one, how it is in the movie. It's spoilers here, which we already warned about, but this is your last warning.
Yeah.
So essentially, when Ladja kills Pancreas, the hero's father, Luca's father, he gets kidnapped and is forced to be his slave, and then it skips, and it basically gives you a little epilogue saying, "You've been worked tirelessly for the next 10 years of your life," and yada, yada, yada. Then eventually you escape, and you continue on, and then later, after you get to choose your wife, as the name of Dragon Quest V is Hand of the Heavenly Bride, you choose originally between Nira and Bianca, and then in the DS version there's a third wife, but they don't reference that here since this is meant to be more inspired by the original.
Sure.
And then you get turned to stone in your fight with Ladja that you have later on in the game, and then you are rescued by your children. And I say children plural because in the movie there's only one kid.
Now that's interesting. I didn't know that there was
a lot of number of differences. I don't know how particular you want me to get into them, but I could definitely list off a few.
Well, okay, so with the whole deal with the sword in this was that it can only be wielded by the chosen hero, I guess. So I'm assuming that in the game only one of those 2 children can still wield a sword.
Yes, and it's always the boy.
Okay, so the other one is a girl. Okay.
Sexism.
Yeah.
Well, this was made like in the 80s, right?
This was like 92, I think it came out.
Oh, okay. Well, still.
Excuses.
But there's a lot of number of differences. Like the biggest part I'd say of the movie is like that love triangle in the middle portion of it with Nira, Bianca, and Luca. And there's like a little thing of, oh, if he does this quest, he'll get to marry Luca, he gets to marry Nira, and then Bianca assists him, and then there's this whole thing of, is this what you really want? And in the game, it's handled a bit differently. The direction of certain objects, like the super powerful sword, is found elsewhere, and that's handled very differently. But the initial quest you go on is to find this pair of rings that they need for the ceremony to wed Nira. And the reward for that is later, he offers her hand. But a thing in the game is, and this always rubbed me the wrong way, was that Nira already had a boyfriend.
Huh.
So you still have the option to marry her in the game, but it was always very weird that she had sort of like a relationship with someone, but she was willing to put it aside for you because you're the cool hero who just brought all the stuff. So it always made her, in my mind, seem a bit more superficial. It seemed like they did a lot of work in the movie to really characterize her and make her a lot more likable in that regard.
Right, and it seems like they kind of recontextualized that too, because they were like, oh, go slay this dragon and then you'll have my daughter's hand, sort of.
Yeah. And there's like this huge, really sad part when you go on the quest to go get the rings and fight the monster with Bianca, because you essentially find out that she's supporting her family and her dad's dying, her mom's really sick. And during that quest, her dad dies, and he asks you if you'll promise to take care of her. And in the typical JRPG way, you have to say yes, like I'll look out for her. So the game definitely pushes the Bianca shippers. It definitely seems like she's the canon choice, and
sure,
both in like the story of this movie and in the actual game itself, it seems like it's the natural choice. Like it should make sense. And I think it does, but outside of some like the minor differences and obviously the major difference at the ending, which I think we can get into our opinions on that when we get there.
Yeah.
But I think it's really enjoyable. I think if you're a fan of the game, you should definitely check it out because you get to see some of the most interesting and dramatic scenes in a RPG. Well, especially for an RPG of that time, and it's such a classic. Being able to see that relived in this absolutely fantastic art style and animation style, it's just a real treat. And so I think it's worth watching if you're a fan. I'd have difficulty recommending it to someone with cold feet, so I'll leave that for the two of you to sort of think about that recommendation, because I definitely do think there is a lot. You're missing a lot of pieces if you don't know the story going into it, which is a shame, because you'd hope they would try to accommodate some of the new crowd, especially because, you know, in the world at large outside of Japan, Dragon Quest is still kind of a niche series.
Yeah, totally.
I will say that I don't know if I could fully recommend this to someone who has, like me, has no knowledge or attachment to the Dragon Quest franchise, because I do, like I said earlier, I do feel like a lot of this is made for the Dragon Quest fans, and if you have not played this game, don't know its story, there's a lot of things that are kind of glossed over, rushed. For example, the whole, like I said, the whole love triangle, I feel like happens so fast that like I don't buy this whole relationship between Nira, Luca, and Bianca, because the whole part where he's like, Luca goes to ask Nira to marry him, and then you see Bianca is sad about it, and then the second one, and in the next scene, Luca is given a potion by a witch because who it turns out to be Nira, that he should be with Bianca instead, and then they get married.
That's also not part of the game at all.
Right,
Yeah.
I kind of got that idea when you mentioned the triangle. I was like, oh, okay, I guess that's how they got around that. That's well, okay.
Yeah.
So how did you feel about that specific change?
I think in a way it makes Nira a bit more likable, in that she kind of knows that she's not like that their relationship isn't really there, because in the actual game you only ever meet her once as a kid, and it's they show that scene where it's literally she gets the very start of the game, you're on a boat with your dad, you get off the boat, and then she gets on the boat with her dad to travel somewhere else, and you bump into each other, you have like a brief conversation, and you move on. Then way later on, 10 years later, you meet her for the first time to do that quest. And that's literally the extent of their relationship, unless you decide to go forward and marry her. So I feel like this at least added a bit more depth to their relationship, and at least gave her more characterization than what the original game had for her.
Sure.
Right.
Although it's a bit roundabout to do the whole potion thing to understand your true emotions. It would have been better to have the character come to that revelation himself.
Yeah.
Well, you know, though, that makes sense that it happened just because of the well, actually, you know, I'll get back to it. We kind of get to the the revelation that happens at the end.
Right. So another part of this movie that I felt rushed to me is after Luca like accepts his quest and he's gonna go off in his adventure, there's like a montage of him fighting monsters. He learns magic kind of offhand. Never really explained how he knows that. But like he has this whole like existential crisis, like I can't be the hero, like I'm not good enough for this quest. I can't go save my mom from the evil wizard. And then he's like, okay, I'm gonna go do this. And then immediately, as soon as the montage starts, he is kicking ass and just like laying down monsters left and right. I just don't feel like his transition from being like really unsure about whether or not he wants to try to become the hero or find the hero or whatever it is he's trying to do, to becoming this kick-ass monster slayer, like happens in a second, and like just to me didn't feel earned at all.
Yeah, that's probably part of it, is the growing pains of it being based off an RPG, where normally, especially in Dragon Quest games, the main character is a silent protagonist. They don't really have a personality. They just proceed, level up. So I think in Dragon Quest, like the world, it seems like most people have the ability to learn magic, but they're just not experienced enough. And in the
Right.
game's mechanics, you go out, fight, level up, and you learn more about how to use it. It's like innate. But in a
Yeah,
story
and
like this, it would have helped if it showed like a scene where maybe his dad was being like, "Hey, remember to practice the spell every day," or just them like him showing him how to use the whoosh spell, which he uses constantly in this movie.
it's like his go-to, yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
Real
but
waste 'cause he learns better spells. I mean, come on.
yeah. But I mean, just watching this kind of like almost says to me like this is probably why we don't make JRPGs into movies because there's just so much story and side stuff and just like the concept of like training and leveling up and stuff doesn't really serve itself to becoming like a narrative like a narrative like a movie.
When you've only
Yeah.
got so much time.
Exactly, where you're trying to condense like a 50 to 80 hour RPG down to an hour and a half. You're gonna have to omit some stuff.
Yeah, it's interesting this point too because most Dragon Quest games, Dragon Quest V included, it is more like episodic in its storytelling. You
Mhm.
do a lot of the quests in the game are you going to one location and there's an issue and you resolve it, and then you move on to the next town and there's an issue and you resolve it. And every now and then, especially in five's probably the most story driven, which is probably another reason why they went with this over other entries in the series to adapt.
Mhm.
And everything sort of connects to each other. Like all the issues you resolve in the game do connect to the overall plot. So
Mhm.
there is a purpose behind it. And I get why they cut a lot of that out because they ultimately don't have time. This is at minimum like a 30-hour game. So they don't have time to go, okay, this is him going to this town. This
Right.
is, and they do show a bit of a couple of game mechanics like the magic, how healing works, the idea of staying at inns, and they also show off like a bit of the monster recruitment, which was a key gameplay aspect of five, where he has the slime and the saber cat that joins him in the game and in the movie, and that's
So
consistent.
are those were the slime and the saber cat were those actually like characters in the game or is that just made up for the movie?
They are. I'll put characters in air quotes because they don't really have dialogue, but they are actual NPCs that follow you around. And especially the saber cat has a lot of significance because that's essentially at the very beginning of the game when you meet Bianca and you go on your adventure to go basically clear out these ghosts in a haunted castle with her as
Mhm.
kids. You do this because there's a bunch of children bullying this baby saber cat and you're
Aw.
trying to get it from them, and they say, tell you what, if you think you can handle a saber cat, go do this, go free these ghosts from this haunted castle. Yeah, go do that. And they're stupid kids, that's why they have that kind of bet.
Right.
And the whole saber cat thing is like part of their relationship. And then
Okay.
later on when he goes and in the actual game, I really wish they replicated this in the movie, but you get separated from the saber cat when you get kidnapped by Ladja and your father's killed.
Mhm.
And when you go back to your hometown, you find like a secret cave. Your dad did have a secret, like a basement, but there's also like a secret cave where he actually had the hero sword, and he was hiding it there. And when you
Okay.
go there, you have to fight your fully grown up saber cat who has been guarding it since your dad died.
Mm.
And then after you beat it, it recognizes you and you get to have it as in your party. And so I was kind of a little
Okay.
disappointed they changed that around because that was like I always thought that was a cool moment, like the way they build up in the game and how that comes about. And it kind of connects those stories and it kind of helps connect the story and relationship between the hero and Bianca, your dad, and like the overall quest.
Yeah, because I mean, I got the whole part where like, yeah, he got separated because he got taken into slavery for 10 years, and then he like stumbles upon this cave and like, oh shit, there's a giant saber cat living in here, and they try to run away from it, but it turns out to be his saber cat, and I thought that was kind of a nice moment. But yeah, I could definitely see where, uh, had it been like, oh no, the saber cat actually had the sword, and not like this giant weird moose dragon thing.
Yeah,
I can see how that'd be
tied
kind
to
of
that's
a cool
tied to a
touch.
different quest too. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think as well in this sort of way, the movie could have been the scenarios could have been altered to kind of make for a more coherent narrative, because the way they kind of structured everything, it feels like they're trying to do like a best of, like, here's the highlight reel moments
yeah,
of the
for
game.
sure.
Like the fight with Bjorn is a real key moment because he's this huge monster. And if you play the DS remake, he's the only monster in the game that is on both parts of the screen because he's that big.
Oh, yeah.
God.
So that, like, it's like this big moment. So it makes sense that he's in here in the movie, and they bumped him up to be like a more apparent and narratively threat than what they do in the game. So there's changes like that, but I kind of wish they did reorder some stuff, and maybe that would kind of help with some of the criticisms you point out, JD, where it is really just a montage of going, look, he's adventuring, he's going out into the world, and we don't really get a lot of like sophisticated character development. We just have, he has doubt, then all of a sudden he doesn't, and now he is kicking ass.
Yeah, now that you say, like, it seems like a best of, I definitely felt I definitely agree with that. Like I said, I feel like this is a movie where it is really hoping that you know what Dragon Quest V is, and then saying, like, showing like, hey, remember this moment? Remember this moment? You love this part, and I'm like, I'm sure for someone who like knows what any of this means, this is amazing. But for me, who doesn't know anything about it, and I'm like, yeah, that's cool. It looks pretty.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you guys have anything else about the movie you want to talk about, or if you guys want to like talk about this weird ass ending.
I think we've skirted around it enough. I think we should talk about it.
Yeah, I think if we want to actually discuss the movie in any more meaningful way, we do have to talk about the ending, because otherwise we'll be saying, but the ending.
Okay,
over and
yeah.
over.
So, Matt said something earlier that I think really does kind of help put a lot of this movie more into context. That so it turns out that the hero is actually some kid in a Dragon Quest simulator playing a simulation of Dragon Quest V, and the main bad guy is not some like demon that the wizard was trying to summon. It's some kind of computer virus trying to shut down Dragon Quest because fucking nerds.
Basically,
that's actually entirely accurate.
So like Matt was saying that this ending kind of almost forgives some of that glossing over and maybe changes to like the original Dragon Quest story, because you're not watching so much an adaptation of the game as you're watching someone play through a simulation of the game and kind of watching their version of it. So it's like, it's not inherently the original Super Nintendo version. It's some kind of like modded simulation version that Square must have put out.
I think it's described it being like it's like a new VR technology that has to wipe your mind when you enter it, which is, sounds dangerous. But
like, that was insane. That was just a throwaway line. Like, we're gonna erase your memory temporarily, and I was like, I wouldn't do that shit for a fucking. Are you kidding me?
I feel like that could get really scary. But they basically describe that this is a new technology, and because Dragon Quest V is so beloved, they entirely remade it so people can re-experience this classic. And if you forget about it, it's like you're experiencing it for the first time.
Okay, so I just had a revelation, actually. Like, given the context of like what this is, have either of you guys ever seen Total Recall?
No, but I know of it.
Yes,
I know the
like
concept.
10 years ago.
Okay, so yeah, Total Recall. Like, literally the plot of that movie, like I'm not gonna get into that whole thing, but like it's one of my favorite sci-fi movies. But basically, the main character, Arnold Schwarzenegger, he was like sick of being like a miner on Mars, and like he wants to, implant memories where like, oh, he's like actually a secret agent, blah blah, so that he thinks that he did all of these things, so that he could seem like me, more of an interesting person. And so obviously that's not the way that this plays out, but like in a way the inkling of like that idea is there. Like they have to get rid of they have to get rid of your memory so that you actually believe that you're this person in this simulation. Like
Yeah,
it's that same exact concept.
Yeah, I can
It's
see
like
the
that's really
similarity
bizarre.
there.
Yeah, it's so bizarre. And then yeah, like kind of like what you were saying about the sort of like glossing over the bits and stuff, because like the virus actually mentions like, oh, you've only actually been in here for a few hours, like, so that actually like made that make like a lot more sense.
Yeah, it puts like the whole movie in context.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do kind of like that kind of take on it. I will say it comes out of fucking nowhere.
It is such a swerve.
Honestly, though, you know what? They kind of planted some ideas here and there. Obviously, like when he was fighting the monsters, they were like falling to pixels and stuff. I just thought that was I thought that was just kind of like the way that they were stylizing how monsters died in this world.
Yeah, it's exactly how I took it.
But that turns out that that's just a side effect of it being like an actual video game within the context of the movie. But then there's also like the bits where okay, actually, so I do have a question, Darren. What's the slime's name in this movie? It's Gertrude.
Yeah.
So as far as I could tell, or as far as I know slimes are like a big part of Dragon Quest, but I always assumed that it was because they were like the main enemy of the games, like they were like the main mob. Do you actually get like your own slime companion in Dragon Quest V?
You do, and there's also like a whole, in some of the remakes, there's like a whole slime battle arena mini game and stuff like that. But slimes, especially like just the normal standard blue goofy looking smiley face slimes, they're like the mascot of Dragon Quest because they're always the starting enemies in every single game. They're a classic, and then they come in different varieties, and in some games like 5, and there's I think 6 as well, you also get multiple different slime party members. But Goobert is not nearly as significant in the game as he is in this movie when he's like, oh, I'm the antivirus program. Here, use a pixelized version of the hero's sword from Dragon Quest 1, 2, and 3 to defeat the virus. Plot MacGuffin style.
Yeah, so that's what I was wondering, is that if they just recontextualized the slime's presence there, because I figured that wasn't the specific case for that character in the game if it existed there, but the way that they were, because you know, with that slime's appearance in scenes of the movie, like at least like earlier, where like you can see the slime is kind of like stalking Luca, and then like finally like, you know, makes itself known, and then like just tags along from that point on, and then when you find out at the end like, oh, it's actually that's an antivirus program, it's like, okay, that actually makes sense that they would do it that way. I
should also specify in Dragon Quest V, there is a system where there's a certain amount of the common enemies that you fight that when you beat them, they will offer to join you.
Oh, okay.
5 is interesting in that there's not really a set party for most of the game. You don't really have like your standard, here are my main 4 people, until the end of the game when you have you, your wife, and your 2 children. But throughout the whole game, you do have like a party of monsters that you can recruit. And that's something they don't really get into here. But that's more of like I initially thought the whole slime thing was just, oh, this is just showing that process of he fights monsters. There's a monster following him, wanting to join him. And it's like trying to show off that mechanic, or it's a reference to it.
I kind of just assumed it was because slime is like the fucking face of the franchise, or like, okay, well, even if this character is not part of the original party from this game, I mean, we gotta have one like always on screen.
Slime in there.
Yeah, you have to. People would be upset.
But I did love deep voiced slime yelling to say, "You gotta save this world!" Like, although apparently in the English version that's Steve Blum doing it, so I kind of wanted to hear that version. Like, oh, that would have been great.
Yeah,
I missed out.
Yeah.
It's just Spike Spiegel as a slime.
Oh my god.
But yeah, I mean the ending, it's very strange. I did I did kind of like it as a twist. I wish there was maybe a little more obvious hints thrown along the way.
Oh wait, no, there was one other instance where you kind of got the idea.
There's like 2 of them.
Yeah, there's the bit where like he takes the potion and then like he's falling through like all like the pixels and like he actually comes across like the little menus where it's saying where he makes the auto. That was the thing, is that when they're showing him entering the VR simulation, he's like, "Oh, you made an auto suggestion," and so that's actually the thing that he sees earlier in the movie, like when he's in that like dream. So that was like the main. That was like the first bit where we're like, "Huh, that's kind of interesting." Like, I guess it's kind of breaking the fourth wall in a way. But then they get to the end and they're like, "Oh no, they are breaking the fourth, like very much breaking the fourth wall, like in a big way." Yes, it's gone entirely.
They just turned off the boundary box of that and just threw away the fourth wall. It's gone.
They turned off the colors and they turned off the collision detection and the gravity and just everything else.
I did find that really funny when he just starts starting shit off.
Yeah.
I thought that was a really cool visual when he's just sitting there like freaking out watching all these people. Like he's like, "This is my wife, this is my son. Like, what are you doing? Just leave us alone." And
it's like if someone came down in our world and just like, "You live in a simulation. I'm gonna just take every part of your world and just like pick it apart." And I'm like,
yeah,
that's not how that works.
Piece by piece. He starts by going, "Look, I'll just turn off all the color. Look, I'll take off all the textures. Look, I'll just turn off gravity. I'll turn off collision." And it's just, you're like, "Oh my god!" Like if you were like actually believing you're in this world, you'd be having the ultimate existential crisis.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, he did believe that because he had his fucking memories erased. He had to be reminded by the antivirus, like, "No, you're actually like a real dude out there. Like,
you're a loser."
Yeah.
You're a loser who's trying to frickin' like drip into that nostalgia feed.
I will say, and you guys watch this in Japanese, I will say the entire speech of him like, "No, this world is real. These people are real, and this is my life." It is hilarious in English.
Is it?
Just because it is so fucking cheesy.
I'm picturing like yeah,
it's just Yuri Lowenthal just going on about how much he fucking loves Dragon Quest and how like it is the real world to him, and is like, "This is the funniest shit I've ever seen."
Now, Darren, did you feel like you had kinship with the main character, like not Lucas, because you were such a big Dragon Quest fan? Like, did you feel kinship with how much he cared for this world and this game? Like,
I could understand the direction, especially in the Japanese. Probably a little bit more subdued than the English dub. That's just normally the case.
I assume so.
My interpretation of it was sort of, it was the idea that even though this is manufactured and it's fake, because you experienced it and you enjoyed it, it is real to you in a sense. Your feelings about it are real. Mm-hmm. And that's why he was like so passionate and wanting to like defend it and be like, "No, you're wrong, even though this is fake, because this is a story that I was a part of and it helped me in my childhood and growing up. It was something I could look forward to. It's real to me. It's worth experiencing, even though it's fake and manufactured. That's why it's still important." Which I'm like, okay, like that's actually like a good message to take away from this movie and to be a nostalgic throwback to all your fans.
Yeah. And that is essentially what he says in English. It's just, for some reason, I think when an impassioned speech in Japanese, when you translate it to English, it just seems goofy.
Right.
Maybe that's just me. Maybe I'm just a heartless ass, but there's no maybe about that. But yeah, I will say I'm not upset that I watched this movie. I did think animation quality wise, it was very well done. I did enjoy the the certain things of Dragon Quest that I do know. They're like, "Oh yeah, cool, it's a slime and he's hopping around and being adorable and stuff."
Actually, sorry, Darren, I had one more question for you in regards to the ending. So, do you feel like it was a good trade-off to end the movie the way it did instead of ending it the way that the actual game ended?
That's a question I've had to think about since watching the movie last night, because I originally heard, I didn't know exactly what happened, but I heard that the movie came out in Japan and I was really excited for it. I was curious to see if there was going to be a Blu-ray release or how it was going to be brought over here. And then they announced later on the Netflix plans. But initially, when it came out in its opening week in Japan, Japanese viewers were pissed. They hated the ending. They hated that it broke the fourth wall the way it did, which is
That kind of checks
interesting.
out because it's so beloved over there.
Yeah,
Like,
and it's interesting because so far from my initial like just perusing through Reddit and a couple of YouTube reviews, people in the West seem pretty positive on the whole thing in general, and even how crazy the ending is. Like they kind of like that it's so crazy and that
Well-
it's so out of, not necessarily completely out of nowhere, but it's such a huge twist that it kind of adds an extra layer to the movie.
So obviously I'm not Japanese, and I don't have like this huge nostalgia affinity for Dragon Quest, but I almost feel like the Japanese fans were who are so like die hard for this series. Like isn't Dragon Quest the series that they had to change video game releases to a different day because people were skipping school and work to go get the new games?
that sounds familiar.
That is the story. It's not actually that, but that's like the widespread version. It was more. There was a that because so many people missed school and work the day Dragon Quest games came out, the government mandated they not release Dragon Quest games on like a work day. But
Right.
it was Square Enix or Square Soft at the time, or sorry, Enix at the time, that said, no, we're just going to do this because this might be a problem later on if this continues to be so popular. But yeah, like Dragon Quest is like the RPG series. Final Fantasy is the global series that everyone loves because that's just the timing of it.
Mm-hmm.
But in Japan, Dragon Quest is like
King.
It's like their comfort food. It's the thing they can always rely upon. You know how, despite how crazy and outlandish the Fast and Furious movies go, each movie keeps making more and more money than the last, and American audiences love them. It's like that kind of love, but to an even higher degree.
Sure.
And a more reasonable love.
I never thought I'd live to see the day where Dragon Quest was compared to the Fast and Furious. But continuing my thought
about
from
it, there's
earlier,
9 movies.
Right, yeah. But continuing my thought from earlier, yes, so Dragon Quest is like this beloved series. I almost feel like the Japanese were expecting a straightforward adaptation, they didn't want to change the story or any major changes, at least. They just wanted to we love this story. We want to just see a straight adaptation of it. And when that ending comes more or less out of nowhere, I can see someone who has like a real big attachment to this story being kind of miffed about it when it has like the ending just kind of goes out of left field like that. Whereas I can definitely see a lot of American fans where Dragon Quest is not nearly as big as over here. I can see where they're not as upset and are a little more accepting of a more off-the-wall ending because we're not so beholden to the story of Dragon Quest V or Dragon Quest in general. I mean, hell, we remember E3 where they announced Hero for Smash Bros. And they had to end it with Banjo-Kazooie so Western fans would have something.
Right.
They needed that taste of comfort food too. But
Yeah,
I think to answer your question earlier, Matt, about my overall impressions on the ending, I definitely think it was a strange way to go about trying to do this sort of twist. I think I would have preferred a closer adaptation, or at the very least, overall, like especially now that we're talking about it, it's very clear that this movie is to celebrate like the memory of Dragon Quest V and the emotions it makes you feel. That's sort of like the goal of the movie. And this ending sort of reinforces that. Whereas I would have been really interested to see, in the vein of like the Disney live action remakes, like a new interpretation of the story that has the familiar beats, it has the key scenes, but it's like it's like a bit of its own identity, and it's like a self-contained story. Whereas this is very not much a self-contained story. You need to really have that context of knowing Dragon Quest to get the full value out of it.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So I think the ending works for the message they were ultimately going for, but it they definitely could have approached it differently. This is not the first way as someone who likes to write stuff in their free time. This is not the way I would go. This is how I need to tell my story. I'm not going to go in my D&D campaign go, all of a sudden I come down onto the battlefield and I make the monsters disappear and I make your stats disappear and I'm going, you're only here because I'm here.
And tell everyone they're a bunch of fat nerds.
Yeah, tell everyone they're a bunch of losers.
I did like
indulging
that.
in their adult fantasies.
I did love that one. Just like the fucking virus just calls everyone a bunch of losers. And like,
Yeah.
damn, that's gotta be a slap in the face to anyone who actually
I'm
knows
not
what's
even
going
here
on.
to like end the world or anything. I'm just here to like just piss on your parade. I'm just here to upset all these freaking Dragon Quest fans.
And in all honesty, isn't that the true villain
Yes.
of everything?
Trolls.
Trolls are the real villains of this world. So is there anything else you guys want to say about this movie before we start wrapping this up?
I want to comment on one thing because this would especially maybe the two of you would be able to speak to a bit because of Smash Brothers and how much Dragon Quest music they brought in there. But as someone who's obviously very familiar with Dragon Quest V, I really loved hearing this orchestral edition of some of the classic songs from the game. And I thought it really fit the movie and it really helped augment scenes. And I was kind of sitting there going like, wow, like, you know, I like the soundtrack, but I've never really thought about how it fits like the tone or how it fits the scene of it being in like in a movie. Like it really does have that grandiose sense of adventure. And I really liked the use of the soundtrack and I really liked all the fight scenes. I thought those were handled well.
Yeah.
I will say I did think a lot of the music was good in this. I think there's one track that I can't say what it is. I forget what part of the movie it was in, but I did recognize it because I think they do use it in Smash Brothers. Which Smash Brothers, much like for fucking Final Fantasy, is very limited. What they put in there.
Yeah,
Thanks, Square.
Yeah, basically the way they got around that, because with Cloud they only had 2 tracks, and then with Hero they had 4 different versions of the Dragon Quest Hero, so each one of them got 2 tracks attached to them from their games, and that's how they circumvented.
And so many people were mad because of the MIDI versions, not the orchestrated version.
Yeah,
so,
that's a thing. That's like a separate. That's like its own podcast episode about.
Well, because isn't it like the composer for it is like real litigious about the usage of his music?
No, I think he's just really xenophobic though too, because it's always the American releases that get like the shitty MIDI version.
Yes, it is 100% the composer and the head music guy. He is a musical genius. He's very talented, but fuck, he's an asshole.
So I will say,
I'm not pulling that out of nowhere. There's actual research to back that up.
Yeah, I actually looked into it. It was crazy.
I will say, obviously it's Dragon Quest, so they're gonna play the overture. I think they play it at least 3 times.
Oh yeah.
I do like the one part where they start to play and then it like just devolves into a fart sound.
Oh, when he's trying to draw the sword. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, it's like it starts to build up this momentous thing, and then it just kind of falls flat. I will say the other 2 times they used it, it was fine because I think the first time they use it is when he's going on his montage to fight the monsters, and that's good. But you get like this very like bright, very uplifting ending to the song, and the scene accompanying it is a burning town, and it's like supposed to be like this kind of like oh shit moment. And he's looking at a burning town. And you get like this very bright, uplifting music. And I'm like, this doesn't really fit at all, but we got to finish the song, I guess. And I think the other one was sometime after. It's like I think right after Luca gets taken out of stone. I think it's like when his kid pulls the sword out of his sheath. But yeah, then. I forget exactly what happens at the end of that scene, but yeah, it's the same kind of situation where the ending of the song does not fit the scene that it's trying to end on there. It's weird, but otherwise the music was good. It's adventure-y.
Yeah, no, it fit very well, and it was neat to be able to recognize some of the music in here from my just exposure from Smash Brothers. So
Mhm.
that was cool. But I imagine that with people that know these songs like by heart, like it must have been more of an emotional impact to hear them like
Oh, yeah.
orchestrated in like the context of a film. Must have been very nice.
Mhm.
I also want to add one more thing, which is I really like the adaptation of the classic Akira Toriyama character designs. I like how
Yeah.
it doesn't just look like everyone is from Dragon Ball Z. There's still semblance of that art style, but it's definitely
not 100% like
yeah.
So I remember when news of this came out, and along with the using celebrity voice actors, I remember reading an article about a lot of Japanese people were mad that they didn't just make a straight up adaptation of of Toriyama's artwork.
I could see why they wouldn't though, because then it would just be like Dragon Ball. It would just be Dragon Ball. Like
It's also a thing too where Dragon Ball. I don't know if you guys have played a lot of the Dragon Ball, but the instant you go 3D, it
looks
gets
weird.
The
Except
only game that's nailed it is Dragon Quest VIII.
Well, and then in regards to Toriyama's style in 3D, like the way that it was done in Dragon Ball Fighters, where they actually emulated like cell shaded and like remade like scenes from the manga and the show and stuff. Like, it worked like incredibly well there. But if they would have done Toriyama's style like 100% in the way that they did it here, it definitely would have looked interesting.
Yeah, and I was not even though I'm not like a huge like Dragon Quest fan or a Toriyama fan for that matter, it did not bother me at all that, this series that is so synonymous with Toriyama's art didn't follow along with his exact designs. I thought that like, yes, this is what this is close enough. Because I mean, you even look at the trailer for the upcoming Lupin the Third movie, which I want to review that if it ever comes out. It looks beautiful. It's not exactly the art style from the manga or even from the old shows that a lot of people are familiar with. It's you can tell it's them and it's close enough to the style, but it's got its own thing going because it's in a different medium. And that's kind of how I feel about the Dragon Quest movies. Like you can tell it's those characters, even though Bianca looks more like Astrid from How to Train Your Dragon.
You know what? I meant to mention that earlier, but that makes sense that you would definitely pick up on that.
Yeah, it totally does. But it's a different medium. It's a different telling of it. I personally I'm not bothered by the fact that they wanted to go a little different with the art style.
As well, it seems like the goal of the story is to try to like sell the idea that this is real. And I think if they had the Akira Toriyama art style, it would still look too much like a video game. And I think that kind of helps the themes of the story. Also, on the note of Bianca, and I'll also extend it to Nira's character designs, I thought they were updated really well because they look mostly similar to their versions here. But if you look at the actual character artwork, like Nira looks a lot less prettied up. So I appreciated they took the chance to help distinguish the characters. And my final point is I'm so glad they went with Bianca as the choice because I would have actually been really upset if they picked Nira. I would have been freaking choked.
You gotta go with the childhood friend that gives you shit.
You gotta go with the person you actually have an emotional attachment to. This stranger you bumped into once on a boat, and then the dad just said, "Yeah, you can marry my daughter instead of me paying."
Yeah. This is probably only funny to me, but I thought it was just so fucking stupid that like Bianca is like trying to like get Luca like to go up and propose to Nira and stuff, like, oh, look at Bianca being a good wingman. And then, like, she literally has, like, feathers strapped to her arm. Like, no, she's a literal wingman. I'm sure that's only funny to me. But wrapping up here, Darren, there is one last question I want to ask you here. Because you have a more familiarity with the Dragon Quest series, if someone, say me, who has little to no experience with Dragon Quest, like, I played the demo for 11, got super bored. I've even tried playing 5 on the Famicom, kind of got bored about 20 minutes in. What entry of the Dragon Quest franchise do you think is the most beginner-friendly?
Yeah. This is definitely one that comes up a lot. I'm sad to hear that you didn't take to 11, since that's probably one of the easier to jump on to points, since it did just have the Switch release and it's the newest and prettiest one.
Yeah, I played. They put a demo out on the Switch, and I tried playing it for a bit, and I'm like, this is all right. It just seems really rudimentary by RPG standards.
Yeah, that's kind of the thing with Dragon Quest. They all play like what you'd expect a classic RPG to play like, and they're all pretty similar in that regard. But 11 does pick up later on, and it is a bit more accessible, and it has a couple new mechanics. Me personally, I will always recommend the DS or even the phone version of 5, which is identical to the DS remake. That I think 5 is overall the strongest game in the series. It has the strongest overall narrative. It has a unique gameplay aspect, and that there's a bit of Pokemon to it, where you can collect monsters. So you're encouraged to go fight exotic creatures and hoping of recruiting them and having new party members. It also helps with replayability. That's part of the reason why I've been able to replay it multiple times, which I don't normally do for these types of RPGs. Otherwise, I think the other one I'd really push people towards is Dragon Quest VIII, which in the West is a pretty popular entry in the series because it was on the PlayStation 2. It had absolutely amazing visuals. A couple years ago, it had a 3DS port, which, while not as pretty as the PS2 version, it has a lot of the best features of just like the series in general. It's got a really strong cast of characters that are really likable and funny. It's got a lot of voice acting, which may help with the interest. It has best wingman Yangus in it.
Yangus.
And his amazing voice acting. He's the best. It also has a speed up feature where you can speed up combat.
That'd be nice.
A bunch of additional gameplay in the 3DS remake. There's new party members. And it also, 5 has random encounters, whereas 11 and the remake of 8 and the remake of 7 on 3DS allow you to see monsters on the field, so you can kind of pick and choose your battles a bit more.
Okay.
So for anyone going in completely cold turkey, I would say 8 and then 11. 11, I think, is maybe a bit of an easier sell to a more wider audience, but I think 8 might appeal to you specifically a bit more. But I will always push 5 as an absolutely, if you want to play a classic Dragon Quest and you only really want to play 1 because they all kind of play similarly, 5 is the one.
Okay.
Man, Darren, you single-handedly saved this episode.
Yeah, if it was
you
just
carried
me and Matt,
this episode.
If it was just me and Matt, we'd just be like, I don't know, it's pretty. There's a slime in there. They played the song once or twice, so cool.
I'm really glad you were bring me on, because I was really excited to see it, and until you reached out to me, I had like forgotten that Netflix even announced they were bringing it over. It was kind of like a ninja release.
Yeah, dude, it was like 2 months ago. I saw an article. It was like, hey, so Netflix just put a listing up for the Dragon Quest movie. That might be a thing. So I literally just put it on my notify me when this comes out, and then it's like a week or two ago. It was like, hey, this is gonna be out on Valentine's Day. I'm like, cool.
That's so fitting that it came out on Valentine's Day.
Yeah, Valentine's Day was a good day for video game releases, huh?
Right?
For a great day for
Dragon
video
Quest
game
and
movies.
Sonic and all kinds of good shit, man.
If there's things I think about when I think about the word love, it's Sonic and Dragon Quest.
Yeah, man.
Especially Sonic.
Yeah, man. It's a great date movie, but you know.
Speaking of Sonic, that'll be definitely the next episode. We were mistaken when I jumped the gun on it, saying that at the end of the last episode, but we had to shut
Matt, what have I
around.
told you about promising people things?
No, for sure. The next episode, Sonic.
It's coming, people. Don't you worry. But Darren, thank you so much for being on here and being our guru to the Dragon Quest universe.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
Like Matt said, you single-handedly saved this episode. So.
Well, I'm really happy to have been a part of it. Thank you guys so much for having me and ensuring that I actually got to watch it. So thank you for that.
Yeah, no problem, man. And Matt, thank you for being here as well. I'm not going to leave you out.
Thank you.
And thank you, everyone out there listening, for listening to this review. I hope that you enjoyed it. And if you are a Dragon Quest fan or like me not, let us know what you thought about the movie down in the comments and, get that kind of conversation going. And bonus, if you got to the end of this episode, tell me what your favorite Dragon Quest monster is. I don't know. Slimes are cute. And then there's King Slime. He's all fat and has a crown. He's the King Slime.
What if I told you that King Slimes are actually a bunch of little slimes that fuse?
That's disgusting and awesome.
It's a gameplay mechanic. Like, you'll fight it, you'll go to the field, and there's like 20 slimes. You're like, whoa, like, these guys are weak, but that's crazy. And you start killing them, and all of a sudden they all jump together. It's a giant king slime.
That's hilarious. I did notice that there's a time where he gets treasure, and you can see the king slime crown lying around. I did pick that up.
It's a lot of little nuts.
Yeah. Well, again, thank you everyone for listening, and fingers crossed, next episode is Sonic, so keep an eye out for that later this week. So,
see you then.
All right, everybody. Thanks, and we'll see you later.
Thanks for listening to the Ink and Paint Club podcast. Be sure to follow us on Facebook and Twitter to keep up with the show. Join our Discord to chat with us, and subscribe to our Patreon for some cool bonuses. Links are in the description. We'll see you next time.